All right, starting the 30-second count.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brownie Productions' very first Faith, Prayer, and Therapy virtual discussion. This event is birthed out of the actual stage production and what I see as a necessary conversation on where the household of faith stands or should be standing when it comes to mental health. In this case, we'll be talking about the issues of teenage suicide prevention and how do we help our children and their families when they're in crisis through faith. Tonight, we have as our panelists Mr. and Mrs. George and Tasha Moore joining us to tell you all a little bit about our panel guests. They reside in Clinton, Mississippi with their children, Gabriel and Imani. They are members of Pleasant Green Missionary Baptist Church in Clinton, Mississippi, where George serves as the minister and his lovely wife, Tasha. They both serve as youth ministry leaders. I also have the pleasure of joining with me tonight members of the Jackson Black Association of Social Workers, Ms. Pat Smith, and also Mr. Andrew Campbell. I want to also give an immediate shout out to our assistant tonight, Mrs. Stephen Brandon, who's going to be helping us bring this amazing conversation to you all tonight. Just to give you a brief overview of the importance of the topics that we're talking about tonight, we're going to be discussing faith, therapy, and prayer. Can they coexist? And whether or not they should coexist. Also, is there a role for the church when it comes to mental health? How do they pitch in and help our children that are considering suicide or thinking about that? How do we help the parents that have to deal with the children that are having these thoughts, and what do they need to do? I'd also like to point out something very important as we have this discussion. As we all know, COVID came along and changed everything. And so COVID took a lot of people out of the church. And some have had to deal with isolation and depression, and their only contact was virtually. Okay. So now some of those things that occurred when they were locked up in COVID and locked down, even with our teenagers, are coming back, and they're coming back with mental health problems. Our children are asking, how can the church help me mentally? Our parents are asking, the parents are asking, how can the church help mentally when it comes to the issues that their children have? A lot of questions have been brought up. The church able to give answers to that. Now is the time that they have to speak to the relevance when it comes to mental health, as if they're relevant, how or where should they be relevant? It's no longer sufficient to just say, just pray. There has to be some other steps included in helping our children and our parents. And so we're going to open up, first of all, with some questions for our panelists, Mr. and Mrs. George Smith. Thank you all for joining us for this discussion on tonight. We're going to start out, first of all, with Ms. Pat Smith. Pat, would you go ahead, please, if you have some questions you'd like to ask to kick off our first virtual discussion.
Good evening, everybody. So excited to be a part of this discussion. As a person of faith, have a very strong faith, and I know that God made a way out of no way. And as a practicing social worker for over 20 years, I understand that there is definitely an intersection with spirituality and with therapy. I believe in therapy wholeheartedly, and I also believe in God. So my question that I propose is, when you have a person that is faith led, they are spiritually inclined, and they question if they really need to if they really need um, to look to therapists and doctors. How do you talk to them about that to help them understand? Or do you believe that there is an intersection? Do those two things coexist? Or do you have one or the other, or just one?
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. George, you want to take your stance on that? Would you like for me to?
You can go ahead and I'll come behind.
Absolutely. I totally agree with what you said as well, Pat, about faith meeting the ministry of mental illness awareness, as well as those tools that are available and resources that are there. Wholeheartedly, I believe that and have the tools to be able to assist those that are in need, whether it's children, whether it's adults, in whatever capacity that it is. But I also believe that it does start with your faith, because in order to get your full healing, you have to be able to know that yes, we do have those resources. Our source totally is from the Lord. He causes the healing to take place. And in order for us to be able to accept all of those resources that are available, we must first have faith that will open up that door for us to be able to receive the help and to get that healing that's needed. So absolutely, it coexists, and I think it is such a stigma around it, but it's our responsibility as people of faith to be able to let people know that yes, you can totally trust and believe in the Lord, but you also may need some help, just like any other illness or
Right.
condition or disease that you have. There are resources, there are professionals in place that are there to assist you. So yes, I totally believe that both can exist and that they do exist and that they do help.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Next, we'll have Andrew, if you have some questions that you'd like to ask the panelists.
Okay, thank you for allowing me to be here on tonight. My name is Mr. Andrew Campbell. I am the president of the Jackson Association of Black Social Workers. We are excited that we're here, and we're excited to make sure this may be an informative conversation where we're having a dialogue and we're talking back to each other about different aspects of mental illness and changing that whole concept of mental illness to mental wellness. And so I want to talk about as far as the church role in dealing with mental wellness. How do the church help their parishioners understand the different dimensions of wellness? Because if they don't get that whole full understanding of these dimensions of wellness, then we're back to the same situation we were before. We're trying to solve problems with no long-term solution. So I'm going to give just a brief synopsis so it can give you something to look at and think about when you're talking about mental wellness. So the first one, if you're talking about the church in particular, you're talking about faith, therapy, and prayer, it will be spiritual wellness. The second will be emotional wellness. The third one will be occupational wellness when people go to work. The next one will be physical wellness. Physical wellness. The next one will be alcohol and drugs. How do we understand how that person can not use that as a dependence? Because sometimes a drug can be not just a physical thing, but it can be a mental thing as well. You know, a lot of our children right now, their biggest drug is what? Social media. Their biggest drug, their biggest drug is their phone, right? Everything that you devote your time and energy to is your God? And how many of our children are really serving the Lord versus serving their phone? You spend your time there, your energy. So let's get back to that so we can make sure we can understand that. There's sexual wellness as well. And a lot of times if we don't talk about these particular issues, then we will be lost in the conversation when it comes to coming up with some solutions. So how the question in the simple term is what role do the church play far as letting people know about those different dimensions of wellness? And is that more relevant in the faith-based community when we put God first and saying God can solve all our problems? I'll yield for a second.
The role of the church in this regard is a very important one, but it's one that here in recent memory, I think is starting to get expanded more. In the past, you didn't see it expand that much or really relegate to being talked about that much. First and foremost, because of the stigmatism that when we would talk about mental illness or either mental wealth, right, that was cast upon the Black community. Now here, and particularly, I can, in my generation, but you toughen up, you just can't say that now, because of the delicacies and the intricacies of people's mindsets, the different things that they're dealing with and what's going on with people. Each person has an individual issue or circumstance that's going on. So we have to find out and get to the root cause of it. Now, the role of the church plays a vital role in that, in having the care, the love, the understanding. And if we ourselves as parishioners don't know fully the educational component, we must reach out to get that education. If we don't have the time ourselves to get educated, reach out to a social worker, reach out to someone who has those tools, bring them in house and have some different type of programs and talks about it. Give them 10, 15, 20 minutes doing service to stand up. Ask who may think they may need some help. Get an email address. Those types of things are good. I say this again real quick as well, because we do play a vital role. There are plenty of scriptures talk about mental wellness, mental illness, different things of that nature. Are from Psalms 34:17. I'm not going to read them all, but I just highlighted a few of them. 2 Thessalonians 3:16. Talking about the goodness of the Lord and turning to Him with all our cares. Again, we know a lot of times the people struggle in that capacity of, I don't even know how to reach out to the Lord. It takes time, takes mercy, takes love and compassion and understanding, not only from the church, but from everyone who plays a role or has any type of input in that person's life. On a daily basis, this is something that we must understand.
Mm-hmm. A good godly, we talk about a village, and not just any village, but a good godly village. And we do have to know and understand that it's real issues, because I know in the very beginning, Felicia, you talked about COVID. COVID had such an impact on not just adults, but our children and their social skills and their mental wellness. And so it's very important that we continue to stay on top of it, and provide the help and the resources. And when we can't do it, then we do reach out, we do reach out for that assistance for those. Again, that's why the professionals are there.
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah.
And I know we talked about the repercussions of COVID, but at the same time, even with something like a pandemic, and yeah, that was, just horrific. But there can be some good to come out of it if we look at it from the proper perspective. Because I really feel like dealing with COVID has brought to the forefront of how much we really need to invest in mental wellness and getting educated about it. I really think it woke up people's mindsets. I really opened their eyes to realize, this isn't just a silent stigmatism anymore. It's speaking loud and clear, and we got to speak over it ourselves.
Absolutely. I totally agree.
Yes. Good information. Thank you all for that. I have a few questions. One of those is how or what ways do you think the church can collaborate with mental health professionals in order to provide additional support for our teenagers and also for their parents when they're dealing with a mental health challenge? What are some things you might suggest or recommend that the church could do? They may have frozen. Okay. So this
And I'm
question
sorry,
is,
Felicia. I think we may be having some connection issues.
maybe okay.
Because
So
that
I can
question
no problem,
did,
no problem. I was asking about how
chopped up. So will you repeat that for us, please?
okay, no problem. So I was asking, how do you think the church can collaborate with mental health professionals in order to provide some additional support for the teenagers and the parents when they're dealing with a mental health challenge when it comes to a child that's contemplating suicide?
Absolutely. I think we kind of mentioned in the beginning. I know I did about having those professionals out there. If we don't immediately have those resources in our individual houses of worship, then we reach out to the community. We reach out to those professionals, and we get them connected with those particular youth or parents that are seeking help.
So would that look like maybe the church having a mental health awareness day or mental health awareness Sunday, or inviting the social workers to come out to the Sunday school classes maybe and to talk with the parents and the children, maybe something to that effect? Okay.
Absolutely, yes. Wednesday, Sunday service, Wednesday night Bible study. Yes, wherever. I think it bodes well for us to be able to do that, because again, it's very important that we continue to have a check on our future. Our youth are our future, and so when they're well, then our future is well as well. So yes.
And what advice would you give? Go ahead.
I was just going to say we have to realize especially when we're dealing with the youth, we must realize that we have to meet them where they are.
Right.
Because oftentimes, I can just think back when I was a kid. I was being talked to over here, but you weren't listening to what I was saying, just for the simple fact that I was young. I may have been young, but I know what I'm talking about. I know what I feel. I know what I'm trying to come across with. But don't dismiss me. Don't dismiss my thoughts. Don't dismiss how I'm feeling, what I'm trying to tell you, just because I'm young.
That's right. That's good. That's good, House.
When I first started working with our youth, when we started first working, I made a pledge to them. I said, you will never. Yeah, I told him. I said, you would never ever have to worry about me shunning you, shutting you down, and looking at you sideways, thinking I'm gonna listen. You're gonna have the floor, and I'm gonna be fair and impartial because I've been there. I didn't want that. I remember it. I've been there. So they have to. They're gonna spot a fake when you're being phony. But you have to be true. You have to be genuine to them and honest with them.
And so that ties into
that ties into answering. Kids, I'm like,
I think he's breaking up a little bit.
Testing and trust and have a trust bond with.
That's true. That's true. That's true. And I was saying that ties into what my other question was going to be. And so you've already given us one good point. I was going to say, so how does the church or members of the church get those children or teenagers that feel maybe ashamed or uncomfortable or like they'll be judged or frowned upon to talk to them, to talk about their feelings? And so one of the things you mentioned was to let them know they won't be shunned, and that you'll listen to them, and not judge them, because I truly believe that for a lot of people that are in the church, they don't want to come forth even as adults and say, I'm struggling with this mental issue, and praying is just not enough for me. Anointing myself is just not enough. I'm not breaking through. I'm going to the altar and I'm not getting anywhere. So if it's a struggle for adults, you can just imagine the struggle that it is for kids, for our teenagers and for our children.
Right.
And so it's important that they know that they won't be embarrassed. Andrew, did you have?
We will have a forum with them. We will have our Bible study time, but also they had our phone numbers, email addresses, and all that. But we would tell them, you have the floor. Whatever's on your chest or on your mind, you want to let off. This is the opportunity to do that.
Right.
But we also let them know, if you don't feel compelled to do it in front of everyone, call us, text us. We can work this out. Whatever it takes so you can get it off your chest, whatever it takes so you can get an understanding.
Okay. Andrew,
if I may, I just wanted to basically, when I was listening to everyone talk, it was some great comments in terms of the church's role, and I just wanted to put some context to where we're going right now in terms of what happened when you talk about the pandemic and the results of what's going on now. So when you look at the CDC findings from 2001 all the way to 2011, they always talked about children not having the opportunity to express themselves, and then being that the children were in silos because they was in certain environmental places where they was at, like for instance, going to church. That's an environmental place. School's an environmental place, right? Mm-hmm. In the community is an environmental place. But this concept of church to most teenagers was based on, you do what I say do, when I say do it, how I say do it, and don't ask no questions. That's the concept that they see. So when we look at the report, overall, young people, they're experiencing levels of trauma and distress that requires action. And so we want to look at the different actual symptoms that is going on with the children based on the data. And the data states that there are fewer behaviors experiences moving in the right direction in how we addressing these issues, because these harmful experiences adolescents are facing are very striking. And a lot of times these conversations don't want to be had in church, right? So there has to be some type of collaboration to deal with these particular issues or these particular harmful experiences that young people are dealing with. Case in point, a lot of young people right after the pandemic, they was dealing with a lot of risky sexual behaviors. And these risky sexual behaviors were decreasing right before the pandemic, but after the pandemic, it got worse. So the protective behaviors like using a condom, HIV testing, all those protective remedies, STT training, that those kind of subjects are not allowed in the church. So therefore we have to make sure that we can bring the church in and bring those particular professionals in so they can talk about those conversations when they feel comfortable with the professionals. People buy from when you like and they trust. I always say that. If I like and trust you and I build rapport with you, then you more or less to listen to me. And also a lot of social workers who are therapists and a lot of LPCs who are therapists, they're trained to engage young people to really talk to them and get them to open up. So that's one issue that we really got to take in consideration, risky sexual behaviors. The second one is there has been an increase in substance use. Generally, it was decreasing, but it's now still high. The substance use is something that's very important as well. A lot of these children are vaping now. And so it's they need to be educated about it, but also we have to deal with it directly. Also, we experience a lot of violence, including sexual violence, and it's not declining in a lot of cases. So we have to be able to help young people understand what it is and how it is to have a relationship, a meaningful relationship. Now, the poor mental health and the suicide thoughts that the young people are having is increasing. And we have to look at that. And when we look at statistics, we understand now the church role has to be a dual role, where we see those children and those people who are stakeholders in the community as family. And then we have to have those particular entities of professionals as what we call not just family, but extended family. And so that's what I think we really got to take into consideration if we really want to try to tackle this crisis, because this is a crisis. Teen suicide and mental health, a mental illness, which should be mental wellness, is a crisis in our community. And so I think that in order for us to have a broad base of looking at this here, we have to look at what the church is already doing, and then make an assessment of what the church needs to do. And also, let's define church. Lots of times we don't do that. For teenagers, they don't even like church. I'm gonna be real with you, because I deal with teenagers all the time. Even the young people, they feel like they're being made to do something. So what we have to do, we have to redefine the structure of what church is to them, because church to them is that cell phone. Church to them is their friends. And so how do we replace, I won't say a person has a behavior, we have to replace the behavior, because this here thing is their God. This here thing is church. And so what we have to do is that we have to make sure we give them something that's realistic, but give them an opportunity for them to have a voice and a choice. And they need to be connected to other people who listen to them. I propose with the Jackson Association of Black Social Workers, we have a lot of different professionals, right? And a lot of our professionals, they do a lot of volunteer time, right? I propose that, and I told this to certain pastors as well, let's go ahead like you have a musician on staff. I'm just going to keep it real. You have the resource. You have a musician on staff. Find somebody in your congregation who already is licensed, a mental health therapist or someone that does that, and you go and contract them out. Why? Because when there is not, it's when the crisis, it's not if the crisis will happen, it's when the crisis happens. Mm-hmm. When the crisis happens and it touch home in your particular congregation, you have somebody on staff that's trained to do that. And then you have these classes so that people can understand how to move forward. I just wanted to make sure we looked at some statistics to understand where we was at and how we can change the statistics if we do it from a collective work and responsibility we all pull together.
So can I chime in?
Yes.
Real quick? And I wanna kind of stir the pot a little bit, because I like what we're talking about, and I like the direction that the conversation is going. But I think the conversation is very surface. And I think the conversation is and that's not to take anything away from what is being said, because it's great information. But from my own experience, and just to kind of provide a little depth into my position, so to speak, I play the role of, I play several characters in the play, The Brownie, and I'm also the assistant director, but I'm also the father of teenage children. And I am a licensed minister. And so, coming from different standpoints, excuse me, and one of the conversations that I had with one of my daughters, and it really triggered a call to action for me. She made the statement to me. She said, "Daddy, if I hear pray about it one more time." Mm-hmm. And the problem that we run into in the church is you have leaders in the church who feel like, because I am called to be a minister, then I have all of the tools that I need to counsel this situation. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying I agree. I'm saying this is what's happening in our churches.
Yeah.
You have pastors who, if a parent calls, if a child has a crisis, the parent calls the pastor. The pastor's gonna call the child up. So let me pray for you,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm gonna bring you into my
Right.
office and I'm going to pray for you.
And
I am
this-
not one to say that prayer does not work, but I am one to say that prayer is not enough.
Right.
Because, but the problem that we have is not just the children who are having mental crisis, but you have parents who are having mental crisis and they don't know how to deal with it.
Right.
You have parents who are going through thoughts of suicide and they don't know how to handle it. And the problem with that is you have a parent who is having a crisis and they don't know how to handle it. And that passes down to a child who's having a mental crisis and they don't know how to handle it. And they don't have access to a resource because you have a parent who is saying, well, we're going to talk to pastor such and such. Well, we're going to go talk to pastor such and such. And then you got pastor such and such who says, well, because I got a PhD in theology, or
Right.
because I'm an ordained minister, then I have what I need because prayer works. Yes, prayer works, but prayer is not enough. I believe it was Sister Tasha who made the statement, and this is the conversation that I have with people all the time. Another part of me, and I'm gonna go ahead and yield the floor again. But one thing about me, even as a licensed minister, I sit on a therapist couch every 2 weeks. I personally go see a therapist because I know that I have some things that I just need somebody to talk through.
Right.
I just need to talk to somebody. And I have provided resources for my children so that they can just call and talk through. But if you have a heart attack, you're not gonna go to the church. You're not gonna ask the
Right.
pastor to only pray for you. You're gonna go
Exactly.
to the cardiologist,
Exactly.
right? If you're having uh nerve problems, you're gonna go see a neurologist. If you're having digestional issues, you're gonna see a dietitian. But it seems like in every area of our lives, we will seek a specialist except our mental health.
Mhm.
And especially in our Black and brown communities,
Right.
because that's just not something that we do.
Right.
I've had conversations with people and I'll tell them, oh yeah, I'm going to see my therapist in the morning. Like, you got a therapist? You don't? You should get you one.
Right.
You should. And insurance covers it,
Yeah.
because now the insurance community is becoming aware that this is a need.
Right.
But getting back to what brought me to chime in is, what do you say? And I kind of want not just our church panelists, but even our social workers to chime in on this a little bit. What do you say to a church leader who says God is enough? What do you say to a church leader who says we're gonna handle it in-house? And
Right.
we're going to, because the Bible says these things only come by fasting and praying.
Mhm.
And you got, if any of you are sick, you bring them to the elders, and the elders and the prayer of faith will heal the sick. Like, and I'm telling you, these are things that are being pounded into our people every week. And to your point, Mr. Campbell, our children don't want to hear it.
No.
Because what's happening is our children are not being touched in church.
Right.
Our
If-
Right.
children are not the focus in church. And a lot of times what happens is the children are pushed over to children's church, which is a glorified daycare center, because the
Right.
parents have dealt with the children all week, kind of, even though they've been at school. But now this is my time to go before the Lord in prayer to get what I need. So what about your time?
And can I
Well,
just add, as we get ready to talk about that, that was going to be the next. It's just interesting how this comes all together because this opens up the door to what I was going to ask about. How do we deal with the stigma in the church attached to mental illness? And so I will yield the floor to our social workers and our panelists for that. But yeah, I really like to know because as we can tell and know, there is a stigma attached to it, especially as Stephen said, when it comes to Black and Brown communities.
I'll yield the floor to Pat, and I'll come behind you.
Okay.
Well, I think one of the things we have to do is start normalizing these conversations. And we start doing that by sessions like this. We start, we have these conversations in church. I am so blessed to be in a church that has a progressive mindset. The way our church operates, and our pastor has said it, we just recently transitioned to a new pastor, but our previous pastor and even our current pastor, they got all their degrees, PhDs, all these things. But they said that when a member comes to them with a mental health concern, we have a relationship with a mental health agency, and our church will pay for the first 3 sessions for a member to go and get mental health counseling.
That is awesome.
Yes, that is awesome. And so that was the philosophy of our
It
founding
is.
pastor.
That's
And our
wonderful.
current pastor, who has just recently taken the helm, is going to take even a bigger step in mental health piece. And so we are working right now, and I just am blessed to be over the health ministry. So we're doing some things right now to make mental health awareness more visible, more present, again, normalizing it more. And that's something we've been working on for a few years. But those are the things we have to do. We have to normalize these conversations because if we do not, you can forget your children ever
Mhm.
coming to you talking about what concerns them. And most of us are of the age to recall that the church, for all practical purposes, is the place that you should be able to go to get whatever it is you need. So we need the people in place equipped to give what you need when it's brought to you. One of the things that I was going to address or ask about in the research that I did, in addition to suicide being one of the leading causes of death, particularly in our young people, there are very high rates in the ages 10 to 24. But of those, that group, one of the higher groups within that group, the subgroup, are children in the LGBT community.
Yes.
And I know when we talk about God and faith, we just do not put LGBT in that conversation. But we are doing a disservice if we don't. Because
Right.
just because we don't talk about it does not mean our children are not considering
Communication.
themselves part of that
Right.
community.
Right.
So when we leave them out, we are missing one of the largest pieces of the groups that are experiencing suicidal ideations
Right.
or suicidal attempts.
Right.
So, how do we as a church who love the Lord and know He heard our cry, how do we address that community and help them to understand that He loves them too? That your needs matter too, that you matter too. How do we do that? And we, unfortunately, are really guilty a lot of times of isolating. And not only the LGBT community. Now, if y'all remember, we all are about the age, back in the day, and it happened in my home church. My sister got pregnant. Prior to her being pregnant, she was a secretary. My granddaddy made us do everything in the church. So we have done everything from clean up, secretary of everything. We played every role. And my sister was currently in the role of secretary of Sunday school. And when she got pregnant, like she could only get pregnant by herself, they made her apologize to the church and they took that position from her. And my sister is 48 years old now, and her relationship with the church has still been traumatized and altered because of what happened to her when we were about 14, 15, 16 years old. So that was what the church did then. But now we've taken that to an even bigger scale. And so we are isolating our LGBT youth. We are isolating sometimes even the youth that may have substance abuse issues and those kinds of things. Let's be clear. Those are hard things to deal with. But if we don't deal with it, we force them to have to get pulled over by the police, or the police come to them and fight them and shoot them to deal with them. So we have got to learn to deal with our community and not leave them to chance. And if the church can't do it, who can?
You can.
So I'd love to hear y'all's perspective on that. I don't have to like chicken to be able to help somebody that like it. I don't. And I don't have to make them feel no kind of way.
Right.
But the Bible says, with love and kindness have I drawn thee. And if we cannot extend his grace, the same grace he extended to us
Right.
for all the things that we've done, if we cannot extend his grace for the things that we don't particularly agree with, that we don't think that are right or what have you, then what are we doing? If you all notice, and I didn't have these stats tonight, but if I can tell you in the last 3 years since COVID 2020, how many funerals I have sang at from either the COVID deaths or violence in this city. And most of them were from people that were under the age of 30 and most under the age of 20. We are losing an entire generation. And so if we are not the ones, who is it going to be? Who's going to save them?
That's right. That's right. And all the trauma that they have to deal with. I just want to add in, even, talking about what happened with your sister, is we can see, that even at that young age, that mentally, emotionally, and spiritually traumatized her and turned her, and nobody
Yes,
ever addressed it. Not even the source from which the hurt came. They never
absolutely.
addressed it, and so she's just carried it. And a lot of it, when it comes to mental health and mental illness, everything that they do is affected by that.
And if
The
I can
way they do, the
say,
way they respond, what they think is all affected by that. And it doesn't matter if it was when they were 10, 8, 9, whatever trauma occurred, if it's not addressed and talked about, or they don't feel comfortable, talking about it, then they hold on to it. I used to say to Jason all the time, I'm in my 30s, 40s, and 50s, and I'm still dealing with things that
absolutely,
I couldn't talk about, or I'll add, not being able to be in a space where you can feel safe to talk about it and it
absolutely.
not come back up. Hey, and this is coming from the 16-year-old that was a Catholic and
That's
went to confessional and said some things and sat in the sanctuary. And I'm like, oh my God, is he just telling my confession? Is he just pointing that out? And from that point on, I was like, nope, never ever again.
That's
He
right.
didn't have to
That's
call a
right.
name, but I was like,
because
nope,
you know what you
just shut
told
it
them.
down and
And if
not
I
say
could just throw
anything.
this piece in, not only so the long-term effect, because like I said, my sister is 48 years old now.
Yeah.
The long-term effect is when she had her children and the
Yeah.
relationships and many of the things that we experience through the process. If
Yeah.
you do not get help where the trauma occurs, you kind of get stuck there. And
So
Yeah.
I do
so
want
it has
to
a very long lasting effect.
show we do have some people who are online who are engaging in the conversation with us. And
Okay.
so we do have one comment, and I'm going to show it on the screen. This first comment is he's saying facts. Churches have dodged the sexuality conversation forever.
Yes.
And then we have another comment who, well, what I'm gonna do, same person, he did a comment that said, do they confess everything?
Absolutely not.
And then
That's
we
good.
have a comment, and I'm showing the comments so that we can go ahead and address and
Right,
bring
right,
into conversation. So we have a
right.
comment that says church hurt can leave a lasting effect on an individual.
Oh God, yes. I'm telling you, we used to go to church. We remember the first Sunday we missed church was the ice storm in 1989. But after that happened with my sister, but after that happened with my sister, her relationship with church has never been the same. Now,
Now,
luckily, I know she loved God, but her relationship with church, not so much.
and if I can chime in, because my dad was a pastor, and he pastored in the same area where
Yeah.
Pat's family was. Uh, and same situation happened in his church, where young lady got pregnant, and the mothers of the church brought her up in front of the church to make her apologize.
That's what they
My daddy
did.
stood up. My daddy stood up. He said, "Not today. Not no, you won't. Not in this church." So he said, "Where's the boy?"
Mm-hmm.
And
Amen.
everybody, like
We're
eyes
active.
up to
We're active.
everybody was like, "Wait, what are you talking about?" Daddy said she did not do it by herself. And so if she owes an apology,
He
then
needs
he
to.
also owes an apology. And if he owes an apology, some of y'all out here owe an apology. Y'all just did what she did and didn't get caught.
Didn't get caught.
There
So
it
if
is.
you
There
not
it
gonna
is.
bring all parties involved, baby, you go sit down and God bless you.
And
Well,
in
I
that
want.
moment, he probably
Yeah,
freed a lot of teenagers from
So watch
feeling
this.
Yes.
shame.
In
that's
that
right.
to
That's
bring the
right.
difference between what happened to Pat's sister and what happened to this young lady. Pat's sister's her relationship was severed with the church.
Right.
This young lady is still active in the same church. And
Wow.
she's on the usher board. She is like, and because what it did, it freed her.
Yes.
It freed
Right.
her. There's a scripture in Galatians that says, "Brethren, if you see a brother who is overtaken in a
Overtaken in
fault,
a fault.
ye who are spiritual, restore such a one in the spirit of meekness, considering yourself, lest ye also be tempted." The
Least.
problem is, and we finna turn a corner in how this conversation goes, but the problem is what happens with the people in the church is you get saved, sanctified, filled with the Holy Ghost, and then you
And
forget that
forget.
you have pain.
Once was
And
some of you.
forget.
As
As Paul
as
said,
Yeah.
such,
as some
you're
of you
some
once
of
were.
and
Yes.
so
Yes.
we forget that I I I was the one who was out here
Right.
doing this, and that.
Uh-huh.
Right. Right.
And
Well, I just.
the only difference between me and somebody else is I never got publicly caught.
Exactly.
Right.
That's
Right.
right.
I didn't
That's
get publicly caught in what I was doing.
Exactly.
But even though the church might not have seen it, I ain't hiding from
So
the Lord.
Exactly.
right. I just wanted to add. Great
absolutely.
point. Thank you so much. I wanted to add another point to this conversation. Thank you so much for making sure we understand that aspect of what happened in the church, and then also when you talk about suicide. I always make this comment when I talk to people about suicide. It's not just suicide that we have to think about. We got to think about homicide, but the side that we don't talk about is called menticide. Menticide is a term that was coined by Dr. Bobby Wright back in the 80s. And it stands for mental suicide. And what happens is that we have a problem with identity, and if a person don't understand how and who they are, they'll always be seeking to find out some ways to make sure they have some peace. And a lot of our young people don't have peace. A lot of our old people don't have peace.
Yeah.
So part of the reason why
Right.
we haven't made a dent in the suicide deaths is that we only focus on individual solutions. People don't live in an individual world.
Right.
We live in a world that has so much to give. And I wanted to make sure before we got off this line tonight that we gave a resource so that people could understand if they were having suicide ideations or thoughts tonight, they can call 988. Just like at 911, you can call 988. And 988 is very important that you can call this time because you have trained professionals that can talk you down. I used to work on a line for 3 years. And so what happens that this gives us an opportunity to reduce the risk of suicide and make suicide preventable. So we can prevent for occurrences and things happening because now you have someone that you can call, and this is a suicide and crisis lifeline. Also, most of the time, it's a term called zone of tolerance. Zone of tolerance is how much I can take and how much when I get fed up with foolishness.
Mhm.
What do I do? I snap out? Do I blow up? Or do I shut down?
Shut down.
You know, and a lot of times, people who are not heard, they shut down. And we have to create what we call, instead of safe spaces, because the church is actually a safe space, right? But the question is that can we move the church from a safe space to a brave space?
Oh, that's good. That's good,
When we,
Mr.
when
Campbell.
we move the church to a brave space, we
Place
have
to be
all the
brave.
stakeholders involved in making sure we have solutions for the different problems that was once problems. Now they're challenges because we're looking at all the dimensions of wellness and saying, listen, we're going to not just deal with our emotional wellness. We're going to deal with the wellness that people have to deal with their job, their occupational wellness. We're going to deal with our intellectual wellness, people, how they think, right? We're going to deal with our environmental wellness, the people living conditions and things they have to deal with. Then we're going to deal with our financial wellness. Then we're going to deal with our social wellness and our spiritual wellness. And when we look at all these different wellnesses, a person becomes whole, and we can stop doing this treatment, and we can move to healing. That's the thing. And the only way for us to really move to healing, we got to heal our people every day. Only way is that we have to have these conversations. We have to find ways creatively to come in and get people to communicate. And that's why the Brownie play is so important, but also these opportunities for us to meet together here and also to re-educate ourselves about what's going on currently to what's going on with our youth. If anybody on this particular call, I'm going to give you this here for free. This is called FOMO. If you never heard of FOMO, FOMO, this is the biggest thing our young people are dealing with right now. And that means fear of missing out. Fear of missing out. Don't take my word for anything I say. Do your own research. And when you research FOMO, fear of missing out, it's going to open your brain. It's going to open you up to understand we can solve the problems of our young people. We understand the language that they're speaking. And if you don't understand and have a conversation with them, then you will never understand what mental health is and how we can actually address it and we bring more awareness. Thank y'all for allowing me to share.
Thank you so much. So, as we near the end of the hour, I want to go back to George and Tasha and allow them to give their thoughts and opinions and feedback on everything that they have heard so far from the viewpoint of our faith-based organizations. Also, want to add, Thelma come in and young people are crying out that people are turning their ears to them or they're not knowledgeable about how to help them. But instead, the church wants to beat them up with the word and pass judgment against them. What skeletons do they have in their past? That's real good. That's real good. Thank you for sharing that, Thelma. Yeah. And that's what we're hoping these conversations will help to change by starting
Yes.
these kind of conversations. That where the church can be, because we always say the church, we portray it as this is the place where healing can take place. And so, what do you do when the place that healing is supposed to take place is the place where the hurt or the trauma occurs? So, I want to turn it over to George and Tasha and get their feedback on that and on what they've heard so far tonight. It may be muted if you all are talking. I don't hear anything.
She wanted us to give just a summation of what we heard.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think we all have agreed on one thing talking tonight is that in order to be able to provide assistance and be of help to youth, to adults, you have to build those relationships. You have to build those trusting relationships. And it does start with us not being prejudiced of everything. When Pat was talking about how the most underserved community is the LGBTQ, I got a lot of letters. It's just like I say this all the time. Sin is sin. God says, I
That's right.
hate sin.
Right.
My lying is just as wrong as someone that is actively living in those particular situations. Anything that does not glorify God is sin. And so God hates it. And so we should treat any sin like any others. And as Pat said, or it may have been Stephen that mentioned the scripture about when we do find a brother or a sister or a young person is fall, ye that are spiritual, we are to bring them back with love. Because the word also says, the Lord says, if I was to mark iniquity, who would be able to
Who will
stand?
stand?
None of
Right.
us.
Well said.
We all sin. And we
That's right.
have to not forget, as Stephen says, once we were. And some of us still are there, if we were to be honest with
Come on.
ourselves. But we do have to be available to build those relationships. That's how trust happens. And then that's when you're able to meet the need and then that's when we can introduce, because we can't keep just telling people to pray first. They don't have relationship.
Right.
They don't know how to do that. So they have to have
Right.
relationship first. And in order to be introduced to God, it's our lives. It starts with the church. It absolutely starts with the church. And so we have to be more available and be willing to say that we don't have it all. We don't have all the answers. We
Right.
don't know it
Yeah.
all.
Exactly.
But guess what? We can reach out to those professionals that do. Did you have anything,
Exactly.
George? I didn't want to take
Love
over.
that. Thank
Just
you.
one thing
Thank
real
you for
quick.
that, Tasha.
One
George,
thing for
you
sure.
had anything you wanted to add?
I'll tell you, I don't have all the answers.
She pretty much wrapped it, did she? That was good. Really great
Yeah.
information. I want to
Just a little small snippet about when she was saying, we have to admit that we don't have all the answers. And
right.
oftentimes I get asked certain things. I tell them, pretty much. I don't have the answer, but I'll get the answer for you. But one thing I do want to add is that we the church, along with the professionals, we all have work to do. A lot of different things that we deal with in the church are sometimes a lot of them are quite generational as well. What's been taught, this is how this is done, this is how that is done, and mindsets are so bricked up and rooted that they can't understand the change or the shift that needs to take place. It's not back in the day anymore. This is a new day. So we have to minister in a new way, in expressive
That's right.
way. Uh, we, with our children and with the youth that we work with, we are upfront, open, and honest with them as much as we possibly can be. Because I tell them in a heartbeat, I said, we're not going to sugarcoat anything to you, because this world will definitely not sugarcoat it
Right.
for you. This world going to hit you, it's going to hit you hard. We want to get you equipped to deal with what you're going to have to deal with in this world. Real quick, and I'm gonna get off here. Talking and teaching and talking about scriptures and things of that nature. When we talk to them, they have proposed a certain situation, and when I get to try and get them to understand, yes, we detest or hate or we rebuke that sin that person is doing. I said, but we are commanded to continue to love that person. The sin we do away with, but that person is a soul. That person is a child of the Most High God, no matter what he or she has done. And we have to love them with the love of Christ in order to win them back, and in order to get them to understand that no matter what it is that they've done, they are not too far from the love of our Lord and Savior
That's
Jesus
right.
His
Christ.
hand is not short, not that he cannot save.
Say that.
Say
Say
me
that. Say that. This is wow. Look, this has been really, really great conversation. I want to first of all thank everyone for coming on and sharing their expertise and opinions and pouring out their hearts. And I want to thank everyone for the comments and giving us feedback. Please know we will be doing this again on the fourth Monday of this month. We will be coming back having this virtual discussion about mental health and the role in the church. And that's going to be on March the 25th. It'll be on this same Facebook page, info page at the Brownie, where you can just come in, have your questions. If you don't have them right then, hey, put them in as you go, as we have a discussion and talk through so many different things.
We have one comment that I do want you all to address. This just came in.
Okay. Oh, okay.
The question is, what do you do when the child is 10 years old and crying out to see a therapist, but her mom refuses to get her one?
To get her help.
Help, I'm sorry.
Yeah, one of our social workers want to take that.
Well, come
What
see,
you
I
do?
work with the children primarily.
Say when in that particular case, I deal with that every day. So when the parent refuses to want to get help for a child, the best way to do is if you can get that person in front of one of people like me and Miss Pat, and we was going to convince them that all we want to do is an assessment, and we'll do an assessment. And it's almost like a needs analysis. We'll do an assessment to find out what's going on. And sometimes when we do an assessment, we'll do what we call a direct assessment and an indirect assessment as well. I'm good at doing indirect assessments with people all the time. And then they wind up wanting to say, well, can I be one of your clients? But I have so many clients that I have to take and give a referral now to other people, right? So it's always important for us to make sure we hear that child and find out who's a trusted adult that child can listen to, that would listen to that child, hear that child, and make sure that that child is able to get that person's get their needs met by being able to talk to someone. It don't have to be that to solve the situation. We have to use what we call creativity. Every time you look at a mental health case, you don't want to solve it right away. You want to find the first thing, you got to build trust and build relationships and build rapport. I love what the young lady said earlier. She says we have to build trusted relationships, and that's where we've been trained to do. We've been trained to build trusted relationships with people so they can open up, and that's what we have to do. So that's a good question.
Thank you for that, Thelma. And let me just add, with your assessments, do they have to like come into your office, or are you all able to go to the schools to meet with those students?
Depends on the agency. Now, the agency I'm with, we do family, individual, and group, and we actually go to the school, and I go to people's houses. I'm still one of the therapists that go to folks' houses. Most therapists these days do not like to go to people's houses. We do telehealth where we can meet them right over online. So we do have different ways of reaching them where they at. And then, that's what's important, where you actually doing therapy and doing it in an environment where the person feels safe. And that's where we create what we call a brave space.
Okay. And the telehealth number, can you provide that in case maybe she wants to share that with the child?
Oh, okay. She can just call my number. It's 601-519-9823. 601-519-9823. And we can just get them and do an assessment. And that's the good thing about it. What we do in our field is that if Pat can't handle something, guess what? I can handle it. If I can't handle it, I always got colleagues that can handle situations, because every person's not meant to be with a certain therapist. Right. You got to be very careful, because some therapists just don't know what they're doing, honestly. And so I like to balance the conversation, because you can't help everybody. Some people I don't counsel. Certain clients I don't take. Sex offenders, I can't take sex offenders. I'm gonna let you know right now. I don't do sex offenders, right? So, but I have a Rolodex of people that does that, and they specialize in it. I do a lot of LGBT. I do a lot of marriage and counseling with families. I do a lot of work with young people, with the babies, and especially children who had suicide ideations. So, and actually have attempted suicide. So that's where, and I do a lot of conflict resolution and mediation as well. When a person gets into a fight, they always usually come to me because I'm gonna give them a plan of care. Afterwards, they're gonna help them. Most time they be best friends at the end of the day. So it's different things that we can do. We have the resources. We can solve our own problems.
Yeah.
We just got to be able to have these conversations and put this mental health approach inside the church so we can create that brave space.
Yes, yes. Great information. Thank you all again so very much. Special thank you to our panelists tonight, George and Tasha Moore. Thank you all so much for coming on and giving your feedback and viewpoint and sharing with us. Of course, special shout out to the Jackson Black Association of Social Workers, Mr. Campbell, Ms. Smith. And hey, couldn't do any of this without Stephen Brandon.
Absolutely.
He is multi-talented. So we thank him for that. We hope to see you all again on March the 25th at 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. And hopefully this is the beginning of conversations that we can have, where we can have answers when our children ask us, how does the church, or how can the church help me mentally with what I'm dealing with? Thank you all so much. You have
Absolutely.
a good night. And please share the broadcast, the replay. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.